In the last section, we talked about how layering is important to support synchronicity in a learning system. Now I'd like to go on to some other implications of this organization into layers. Layering emphasizes that conditions are defined on different levels of complexity. A system gets raw inputs from the outside environment, sensory inputs in the case of the brain. The complexity of a condition can be roughly understood as the total number of sensory inputs that contribute to its definition, either as direct inputs or via intermediate conditions. So, modules in the first layer detect conditions that are combinations of raw sensory inputs. Modules in the second layer detect conditions that are combinations of the conditions detected by the first layer, and so on. In a real system, there can be various kinds of reverse information flow we'll discuss later. One important property of conditions on different levels of complexity is that they're appropriate for guiding different types of behavior. If the inputs are visual, for example, fairly simple conditions may be useful for discriminating between different visual features, like arms, legs, wings, tails, and so forth. Discrimination means that the groups of conditions detected within one type of feature are different from the groups of conditions detected in other types, although some individual conditions may occur in more than one type. These conditions could therefore guide behaviors like naming the features. More complex conditions could be good for discriminating between different categories of visual objects like cat, dog, horse, and so on. These conditions could be useful for guiding behaviors like naming the categories. Even more complex conditions could discriminate between different types of groups of objects, such as the groups of man and horse, but in one case a man riding a horse, in another leading a horse, and in yet another putting a shoe on a horse. Even more complex conditions could discriminate between different extremely complex situations involving, for example, multiple interacting groups of people, like a soccer match, where different groups of players, the referee and the linesman, the manager and his team, the large group of people making up the crowd, and the group of people providing various support and emergency services are all interacting. The conditions detected within these groups of groups would be useful for guiding behavior in these very complex situations. But it's important to bear in mind that any condition on any one level might have some usefulness for guiding behavior on some other levels. So even in a complex situation like a soccer match, detecting conditions at the object level indicating someone holding a gun, for example, would have strong behavioral implications at the most complex levels. If there's multiple sources of sensory inputs, conditions can be detected first in the information derived from just one sensory mode, and then multimodal conditions that are defined by combinations of information from different senses. So we've added another characteristic of modules. The layering organizes detection of conditions by condition complexity, and that has some behavioral implications.